So without further ado,
Well, as is our tradition, ladies and gentlemen, you are invited to stand and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll do a quick review of the published agenda. There is a consent agenda, and any item on the consent agenda may be removed for separate discussion and/or action upon request by any board member and/or superintendent. We do have good news tonight. One of our favorite annual traditions. We're going to be recognizing some student artwork and the students themselves, so that's going to be a lot of fun. We also have some staff member recognition, as well as some national recognition to mention to you tonight, which you already know about. We have 2 action items on the published agenda. Ken Larson, our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Business Operations, will provide an update on our bond advisory services. And then Dr. Harwood, our Superintendent of Schools, will lead you through a discussion regarding the litigation question regarding vaping devices. We have 2 discussion items on the agenda: bond issue summer projects update, and then also the enrollment report, which is also an annual report for the Board of Education. We also have patron input on the agenda, and as of the start of this meeting, there are no requests at this time to address the board. And then there's one written report that was included in the board meeting packet, which was published online.
okay, thanks, Albie. Board members, do you have any questions or feedback regarding the consent agenda? Bill?
I got a conflict with check number 49205 for the phone contract.
All right. Anything else?
I move to adopt the agenda and approve the consent agenda as amended.
Okay, all those in favor? All right, Bill? Nice day.
Okay, I move to approve payment to Kansas Land Management LLC in the amount of $31,477.50 with check number 49205.
Second.
Seconded by John. All those in favor? Bill, come on back.
All right, members of the Board of Education, we are delighted to once again have some students who are going to show you some incredible artwork. And without further ado, I'm going to, it's my pleasure to introduce Nancy Roberts. She's one of our gifted art teachers. I say gifted because she's talented in her own right, but she works with all of our art teachers to get this organized every year. And so she's going to take it over from here, and so that you can see some of these wonderful pieces of work.
Thank you for having us back again this year. You've probably noticed all the artwork that's hanging up in the lobby, the frame pieces. That's part of our district's permanent student artwork collection, and every year we like to add to it. So every building in the district will have one chosen piece of outstanding student artwork that will become part of this permanent collection. And so the award winners from last year are here tonight, and we're gonna honor them and formally present their artwork to the board. I did want to take a moment to thank you because the 2 high school pieces were purchase awards, because those are on such a professional level and those students spend so much time on their work. It's kind of hard to have them give it up, so this is a little incentive. But so thank you so much for that. I am going to begin with our 2 high school pieces. Go ahead. Those students could not be here tonight because they're already off to college, so they were not able to return. I know that Olivia Mills, the representative from DeSoto High School, is going to school at the University of Arts in Philadelphia, so that would have been an expensive plane ticket. And then the representative from Mill Valley High School is Avery Sheltra. So I think that's the blue piece. The print is Avery Sheltra's, and the portrait is Olivia Mills. Just beautiful.
we'll put these on display in the lobby so that you can see.
Yes,
them.
when you leave, you'll be able to take a closer look at everything. And so I teach at LTMS, Lexington Trails, and our award winner from last year was Ryan Lang. So Ryan, if you would come up here with your piece and show it to the board and maybe the audience, and you can come over here and get a certificate from Mr. Harwood. He needed to, the students did a large-scale animal eye study, and their goal with this piece was to use a full range of values. So they had to have white highlights and pitch black shadows to really get that richness so their eyes would pop. So Ryan did an outstanding job. Thank you, Ryan. And then I might have you grab Gracie Smith's from Mill Creek. Do you have it?
I do.
Great. Okay, then Gracie was not able to be here tonight either, but she's from Mill Creek Middle School, and she did an intense observation piece. One of them is pastels, chalk pastels, the other is oil pastels, and the final observation piece is with graphite. Very nice job again. So that's Gracie. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over to our other middle level teacher, middle school from Monticello Trails, Wendy King. All right, thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
My student is Madison Kuster. There she is. And her work is right up front. And it's a pretty large one. With this lesson, we were learning about different ways that artists use animals in art. And this is an oil pastel drawing. Is Elizabeth Purcell from Riverview.
My student is Amy Beaumont from Riverview Elementary. She did an incredible job on a study of a monarch. In the background, there is a crayon water resist painting. She hand rendered the butterfly. She did not trace that, she hand rendered this. And she came up with the idea to make it very large and overlap the background. None of the other students came up with that idea, so it was also very original. The next art teacher is Taylor Newman from Prairie Ridge.
All right, my student that I'm recognizing tonight is Addison Moeller, and she's a 5th grader this year. Addison, come on up. We created a relief print after we studied Islamic architecture, and we created a design that would repeat to create radial symmetry, and we printed it on top of a colored background to create that interesting design.
Good evening, I'm Chris Capel from Starside Elementary School, and it's my privilege to introduce Daria Mazzaro. And she is a 5th grader, but last year was a 4th grader. We did a study in drawing, and this is a contour line drawing that basically was a practice. But I'm glad that it was chosen because you never know what turns out in my thing. Daria was challenged because in drawing this, she was not allowed to lift her pencil.
Hi there. My student is Allie Fondre. So come on up, Allie. Allie is a middle school student this year, but last year she was with me at Horizon in 5th grade. Her artwork is a print of a cityscape, and she made the cityscape using a piece of styrofoam, and then we rolled ink on top of it to print it over a watercolor background. And to inspire us for the city, students studied architecture from around the world. And next we have Shelley Sodders from Mize Elementary.
Good evening. I'd like to introduce Ava Tepfer. She is currently a 3rd grader at Mize, but last year as a 2nd grader.
It's okay.
Second grade students last year read the book Vincent Van Gogh's Cat, which is written and illustrated by 2nd graders from Muncie, Indiana, which is a scholastic book. And though we don't know for sure if Van Gogh had a cat, the story illustrates a furry feline walking through paintings of various art masters like Van Gogh. And so while illustrating positive and negative space. Our second. I'd like to introduce Megan Clark.
Tonight I'm here to honor our student from Clear Creek Elementary, so Chloe, if you'll come up. This is Chloe Kappa, and she's a 1st grader this year. Last year in kindergarten, at the end of the year, we studied the proportions of the human face, and each child drew their face freehand, and then used a mirror to observe closely and try to make their drawing look like themselves. And then they added their painted hands on top, inspired by the book Make and Paint No More. And Chloe did a lovely job representing herself and her self-portrait. We also want to recognize tonight that the art teacher from Belmont Elementary, Joanna Trotter, couldn't join us, but we want to honor her student, Olivia Thompson, who worked on her version of Monet's Water Lilies using oil pastel and watercolor. And then finally, on behalf of the whole art department, we just want to thank the district and the board for your support of our art programs. We appreciate what it does for our students' academic success and their social and emotional development as well. So thank you for all you do to support us.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education. This evening, we're going to be recognizing a couple staff members from Lexington Trails Middle School. So I'd like the principal, Mr. Clark McCracken, to come forward, please. Our first staff member from Lexington Trails Middle School we'd like to honor is Susan Slater. Mrs. Slater serves many roles at Lexington Trails Middle School. She is viewed by the staff not only as our PE teacher, associate principal, and athletic director, but also as a helper, supporter, and friend. She embodies Panther pride, and we are thankful for all she does. Thank you, Mrs. Slater. Our next staff member from Lexington Trails Middle School is Connie Euler. Mrs. Euler is one of our dynamic LTMS secretaries. Makes us all look good. Her positive attitude and smile, coupled with her efficient, detailed work, positively impacts students, parents, and staff. The town of DeSoto and USD232 is a great place because of people like Connie. Thank you, Mrs. Euler, for what you do for Lexington Trails.
Good evening. We are also recognizing some individuals from Clear Creek Elementary tonight. So I'd like to start by having Kelly Bailey McCall, the principal, please come to the front. And if we could start by having Kimmy Wong, please come to the front. Kimmy serves as a paraprofessional at Clear Creek. And in the words of Kelly, Kimmy contributes so much to the community at Clear Creek. Her smile and positive attitude brighten everyone's day. She works hard to establish strong relationships with students and truly cares about each one. She is dedicated to helping students and is well respected by the staff at Clear Creek. Students love spending time with her and are always in for a good laugh. We are very lucky to have Kimmy at Clear Creek. Thank you for your service. And next I'd like to welcome Laura Lee Coca to the podium. Laura Lee is a 4th grade teacher at Clear Creek. And in words from Kelly, Laura Lee is one of Clear Creek's unsung heroes. And we believe it's high time we celebrate her and her passion for students. Her positivity shines wherever she walks into school, and she's always willing to move mountains for each and every student. With a heart full of love, Laura Lee embodies Clear Creek's belief that all kids are our kids. Thank you for your service. And before I sit down, I have the privilege of recognizing Clear Creek this evening. So if you are here for Clear Creek, or if you've ever worked at Clear Creek, or had a student at Clear Creek, or anything, would you please stand? I'm standing too. I get to stand. Yay, let's give everybody a round of applause. Now I'll tell you why. Now let me tell you why all these fantastic people are standing, and they have shirts on, which are awesome. You guys can sit down now. Thank you. We are pleased tonight to share with you, the board, some very exciting news about Clear Creek Elementary. As you may recall, the U.S. Department of Education announced on Thursday, September 26th, that Clear Creek is a 2019 National Blue Ribbon School. They are one of only 362 schools in the entire country to receive this honor this year. The award designates Clear Creek as an exemplary high-performing school in Kansas, which represents the academic success of students on state assessments over time. It also represents years of consistent commitment by teachers and parents. You may be wondering how Clear Creek was considered for the award. Each year, the Kansas State Department of Education selects a small number of schools to apply for the National Blue Ribbon Award. The state determines its own criteria for school selection and then contacts a school for the formal application process to represent the state of Kansas. We believe Clear Creek is a reflection of all of our schools in the district, and we are so proud of this prestigious national recognition. Representatives from the school will travel to Washington, D.C. in November for the awards ceremony. So, if you are in one of the special shirts this evening, if you'll please come to the front, we want to take a quick picture. And again, congratulations.
That concludes our good news portion of the agenda. We welcome you all to stay and hear about enrollment and bond advisory services and so forth, but please feel free to mingle and head wherever you have to go this evening at this time if you wish. Yes, but please, the invitation is open. Mr. Larson, would you be willing to make your way up to the podium at this time?
Good evening. I sent you a report earlier about our bond advisory services, which have been provided by George K. Bond Company. The board appointed them in the July organizational meeting. George K. Bond had been our bond advisor since I've been in the district, so many, many years. They have sold as of September 27th to, it's pronounced Stiefel. Spelled Stifle, but it's pronounced Stiefel and Nicholas and Company. They're headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. Mr. Edgar, that has been our account manager, retired effective October 1st. That was not unexpected. He had planned to retire either this year or next anyway, so he chose to go ahead and retire. Our account would transition over to a gentleman by the name of David Arterbury. I've known Dave for well over 10 years. He's been kind of the behind-the-scenes guy on our account anyway, so he's very familiar with bond issue, the bond sale we just did, and the one coming up. So it would be my recommendation that the board appoint Stifel and Company to be our bond advisors, at least through the current year. Then if the board so desires, we can do an RFP for July 1st forward. Any questions about the transition? It will be seamless as far as I'm concerned.
I'll just share quickly. I'm a financial services professional by day, and Stifel Nicholas has a wonderful reputation. They're highly respected in the industry, and my experience has been nothing but positive with them on a professional level, so should be no problem.
I think the thing with Stifel is they were primarily in the eastern two-thirds. They had one office in Denver and a couple of offices in California, but other than the Denver office, we're pretty void here in the Midwest, and this is the strength area of George K. Baum. So it kind of gives them complete coverage over the U.S.
Should we do? All right. I move to name Stifel Nicholas and Company, Inc. as the USD232 bond advisor for the remainder of the current fiscal year, which ends on June 30th, 2020.
Second.
Take your pick, Rachel,
Rochelle.
Rochelle, or Angela.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Okay. Dr. Harwood, you're up.
All right, so we're going to talk about a consideration of litigation regarding e-cigarettes and specifically Juul. So a little bit of background before we get started. You may be aware that Goddard Public Schools, which is outside of Wichita, and Olathe Public Schools have already entered into a lawsuit against Juul. So that's a little bit about the background. All 6 Johnson County schools were asked to participate. It takes board action to do that. So tonight, what I'm going to do is kind of give you some background on why Juul versus any of the other e-cigarette manufacturers, and then why, as a school, we might consider being involved in a lawsuit. So that's the major part of it. Mike Norris is also here. Mike is our attorney. He also represents Olathe Public Schools. And if you looked at the resolution that was a part of the board packet, Mike's firm is one of the law firms that are engaged in the lawsuit. That's important because, I'll just kind of say this up front, but I'll probably say it again, is that we would have no upfront costs for the litigation. The litigation would all be on contingency. So having Mike's firm as part of the lawsuit means we're not paying him on an hourly basis the way we would do for other legal services. And Mike can answer some questions as we go along if we need him to. So with that, I'll kind of jump into the issues. So vaping has been in the news a lot recently. And one of the issues is that the former FDA commissioner has talked about it being growing to epidemic levels. In 2018, high school student use of e-cigarettes has grown by 20%, and e-cigarettes are the most popular tobacco product used, rate increased by 78%. Up until the introduction of vaping, tobacco use by students had been decreasing significantly, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. That really was not much of a problem in schools. So just a little bit about electronic nicotine delivery systems, also called ENDS, if you read any of the literature. On the left, you'll see e-cigs and vape pens. Some of the ones in the middle are called advanced personal vaporizer. Those are what some of the earlier ones look like. You can also get them to look like cigars or pipes. The one on the far right is a Juul pod system. And if you notice, one of the things that makes it particularly difficult in schools or even in people's homes is it looks like a USB drive. And actually, you can recharge it by plugging it into your computer to charge it. A little bit about what is vape. There's an e-liquid. The liquid contains nicotine, then some other ingredients, propylene glycol and glycerin and flavoring. But then the other compounds are actually where it becomes problematic, and that the other compounds, the list varies based on whatever the manufacturer puts in there. And one of the biggest issues is that vaping and e-liquids are not well regulated, and so a lot of people don't know what's in them. So that's causing some of the problems as well. The other problem that comes up is that one Juul pod contains about the same nicotine as 2 packs of cigarettes. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But for the most part, e-cigarettes can deliver a much higher level of nicotine. And then Juuls are more than 59 grams per milliliter. And one of the problems we run into is that by these statistics, that 63% of Juul users don't know that the product always contains nicotine. And again, nicotine is very addictive. So specifically, I learned a lot about this in the last couple of weeks. Nicotine salts are the product that are the chemical substance in Juul pods that deliver the nicotine. And the reason that's important is that nicotine salts are made by taking free-base nicotine and adding an acid. Juul uses benzoic acid. The reason that's important is that nicotine salts are much less caustic in your throat. So for those of you who ever tried smoking a cigarette, typically the first thing that happens is you cough, and that's because the free-base nicotine is very irritating to your respiratory system. Nicotine salts are much less irritating, and because of that can deliver much more nicotine as you move forward. The other issue is that the adolescent brain is uniquely vulnerable to the effects of nicotine. That's true for most things causing an addiction, which is why tobacco and alcohol and all those things are, you can't get it until you're 18 or 21, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in. So this is the part about why Juul. So you'll notice, so e-cigarettes have been on the market since probably around 2005. The important part about this graph is that you'll see that there was quite an increase in the market between 2001 and 2013. Each of those are quarters, so each 4 of them make up a year. So from 2012 until about 2016, there wasn't a lot of change. The little red is Juul, and you'll notice that they came into the market in the second quarter of 2015. And it's important to notice that the tremendous rise in Juul sales in 2016 and 17, that will be important here in a minute. But that's a big part of why Juul and not some of the other manufacturers. So from 2017 to 2018, there was a 78% use, or 7% increase in the use by high school students, which corresponds to Juul's rise in the market. And that the amount of advertising that middle school and high school students were exposed to has increased dramatically in the last 3 years. So the former head of the FDA also kind of called out Juul as helping to recognize the problem that they've created. And so then why schools would be involved, and so it negatively impacts the educational process. It does that in a lot of different ways. One, it's a major distraction. It takes up a lot of time for administration. There is a significant number of out-of-school suspensions, which I'll talk more about in a minute. We've had to change the way we supervise things. We've actually purchased and are getting ready to install some other things for detection of vaping. And so it takes a lot of time and energy. So we do have a cost, both in time and resources, but then also in the classroom. The part that's not on here that's probably the one that will be the most disturbing over time is the effect of nicotine on the teen brain and what that does for student learning. One of the other things that's come about that we haven't done a lot with yet, but we'll have to start looking at, is helping students that are addicted to nicotine and cessation issues. At my student advisory council last week, I was asking about how bad things are. That's actually one of the questions I got, was what can we do to help the students that want to stop but can't. That would kind of fall outside of our normal realm of things, but if that's one of the things that's causing students difficulty, we're trying to help in some way. So the last one is stiff punishments and necessary to deter students' use of suspension skyrocket. This is the suspensions because of vaping in the last 3 years. So you'll notice that suspensions for vaping have increased 2,700% in 3 years. The suspensions only during 18-19, if you look at an average of about 3 days, and some of them are actually longer if they're second offenses or involve other things, is more than a full year of school, not for one student, but if you put them all together, it would be a full year of school. And then just a little bit of back to the comment about how tobacco is now being used in schools. Over the same 3-year period, there were 2 suspensions for tobacco products. So we're not seeing tobacco in schools anymore, it's vaping. So why would a school district be involved? Until recently, vaping is largely unregulated. Most of the regulations for products that were on the market by 2016 don't take effect until next spring, so they're still unregulated. Right now, of institutions that are feeling the impact of the epidemic, schools are bearing the brunt of that. So that's one of the reasons. One of the questions that's come up is when you look at tobacco, those lawsuits were led by states. At this point, the states don't have enough damage to start bringing lawsuits forward because they're not seeing the greater health impacts. Now, like 18 deaths in the last 3 months will probably get some of that rolling, but it's not happening yet. And then the next part is it's that Juul specifically there's a lot of evidence that would say has specifically targeted teens. And that's evident in the rise in suspensions that are related to the rise in Juul's part of the market share. So Juul has recently said, well, we'll stop advertising. Well, in a lot of cases, the damage is done. They've tried to make it part of the culture and have been successful in a lot of ways. So we'll be dealing with this not only from the kind of the policing factor of it, but also the student care part of it for years to come. So the lawsuit is actually looking kind of at 2 different things. One is injunctive relief, which means regulating the product and restricting advertising much the way that's done for tobacco and alcohol products now. But the other would be abatement. So as we incur more costs going forward with dealing with the situation, those could also be I guess, part of a settlement that would come out of that. So just to kind of give an example, so all of the sources, a lot of them came from Olathe because they did this presentation a couple of weeks ago. I put in the 232 specific things, and I changed the one slide because I like a couple of different ones. But there's also then the American Academy of Pediatrics, was where a lot of the information came. So with that, I would entertain questions from the board, and if we have some I can't answer, Mike will come up and answer questions.
Frank, I have a question regarding whether, if the school districts included in this suit should win this litigation, this lawsuit, how would what are we asking for?
So, so the injunctive relief would probably not have a monetary value. So that's going to be stopping the practice in some way. The abatement actually would have a monetary value. And so as part of during the litigation, there will be experts that will come up with some determinations about what are the actual damages that go along with that. So some of it are easy, like, if you've had to increase staff or if you actually bought resources. Some of them are less direct in dealing with helping educate students that may be somewhat impaired or having a problem because of the nicotine addiction or because of the vaping. And then other parts will be, because some of this will get settled, and then how long does it go on? We'll be projecting how long some of those things will happen. So there would be monetary damage that could be awarded, along with injunctive relief that would be monetary. So just so you know how contingency works, we wouldn't pay anything up front. And then so there would be 30% after expenses would go to the law firms, and then whatever portion of a settlement that would be determined for USD232 would come to us. Now, I don't want to try to get into too many details, but this is not a class action suit. This is a mass tort. So it will most likely, there'll probably only be a couple of cases that might ever go to trial called bellwether cases. We wouldn't necessarily be one of those. But what we're looking at as far as our own costs, we will have some staff time in putting information together to give to the attorneys to make part of the case. The estimation that the attorneys have said is about 20 to 60 hours over the next 3 to 5 years. Now, I was in a room talking with all of the Johnson County schools, so I'm thinking we're be closer to the 20 hours, and Shawnee Mission would be closer to the 60 hours just based on size, but that's not known. For a bellwether case, that would be significant time because that will be the group that's being deposed by Juul's attorneys and everybody else. So if that were the case, that could change. Part of the issue is that if the board decides to move forward, we can stop at any time. If the attorneys decide that we don't have enough information to show enough damages, they can decide that they don't want us to be part of the suit because there just wouldn't be enough there. But that would be, that's either side can terminate the agreement as we move forward. That's Bill and Kevin with questions.
Where's the KASB in this? Why don't they take the lead role?
So KSB could not be, and Mike might know that, so KSB would not have any damages because they, as an organization, don't have students and don't have this happening in their building. So even if KSB was involved, they would be looking at school districts to sign on to be part of it. Does that cover it, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Is there precedent for school districts participating in lawsuits similar to this over the last 20 or 30 years on any other issue?
I'll let Mike come up and answer that.
Rather than sit back here, I'll come up.
Come on.
Come on up, Mike.
While I'm unaware that school districts have filed suits like this in the past, I am aware that other public bodies have done so with respect to other products. Most recently, cities have joined forces to sue the opioid manufacturers. You've seen that happen, and I think there are hundreds and hundreds of cities that have been fed up with the fact that they've had to deal with so many of their citizens being addicted to opioids that they have taken steps to stop it. So if I could draw any parallels, it would be between that kind of case and this case. To show you how unusual it was for Olathe to take this step, I have had the privilege of representing Olathe since about 1978. I believe this is the very first time they have been a plaintiff in a lawsuit against anybody. And according to the superintendent at his news conference, and talking to principals at schools within Olathe, they identified vaping as in the top 2 of problems that they have to deal with. So it's a very serious problem. And they passed a resolution, doesn't mean you have to, on September 27th. And actually, the lawsuit did not get filed until today. And today, I read in the New York Times as I was sitting back there, 3 lawsuits were filed today. One by Olathe here, one by the St. Charles School District, St. Charles, Missouri, and one by a school district in New York. I think there are a lot of other school districts that are waiting in the wings. I'm not involved in trying to recruit anybody. I just happen to know that there have been active discussions that have gone on. I don't think Goddard has yet filed suit, although they have approved a resolution to do that. One other point that may be of interest to you. it is my understanding, because there's like 4 or 5 other law firms that are involved in this. If DeSoto decided to authorize the initiation of litigation, the lawsuit would be filed by DeSoto School District against, for example, Jewel, who has, I think, like 70% of the market. And it would be filed as Olathe's was in federal court for the District of Kansas. It would be filed in Kansas. So whether Blue Valley decides to file suit and Shawnee Mission decides to file suit, there'll be separate lawsuits. It won't be like there's one lawsuit with 7 school districts who are co-plaintiffs. Now, it's possible that if DeSoto authorizes this, and there was a lawsuit, USD232 against Jewel, filed in federal court in Kansas, it's possible that that case could be consolidated with the other Kansas cases, Goddard, Olathe. And it's my understanding that, without trying to get too deep into legal details, because you might want to know what's going to happen to it. It's forecasted that when cases get filed in federal court all over the United States, those cases can be all brought together in what's called multi-district litigation. So all of these cases will be kind of all wrapped up, and for a time, probably be sent to a judge either in the Northern District of California or a district judge in New Jersey to supervise all of these school district cases for the purpose of discovery. For instance, if somebody wants to take the deposition of the president of Jewel, Jewel is going to want to say, well, I don't want him to be deposed 500 times by 500 different school districts. We only want him to depose once. And so these cases get consolidated for the purpose of what's called discovery, taking depositions and that sort of thing. And oftentimes, that's where they are for a year or 2 or more. Sometimes that leads to settlement discussions. Sometimes it leads to a settlement. If the matters don't get settled, then at the end of the discovery period, the judge that's supervising the multi-district litigation sends the cases back from where they came. So if Olathe's case, in your case, if you authorize it, went to the Northern District of California, at some point in time, it may be transferred back for trial at the case in the district where it was filed in Kansas. So that's kind of the roadmap. And that's just how things get handled. When there's these common issues, there's a lot of separate lawsuits. Usually they have some panel that kind of supervises the whole thing in one venue. And at some point in time, if matters don't get settled, as Dr. Arler told you, usually one of the plaintiffs is designated as the bellwether case, and that'll be case number 1 that's tried. Just like I think a week or so ago, the judge in Ohio managing some of the opioid litigation, he designated one of the cases back there as to be case number 1. And then things get sorted out. So that's kind of what your expectation should be. Do you have any other questions about anything else that might be associated with this? Yeah.
Mike, I have a question. If we pass a resolution tonight, what does the timeline look like for actually filing a suit?
I'm not in charge in this group. I don't know what I'm in charge of. I'm certainly not in charge of that. But I would find out, I would let you know. My guess is it would be, I'm sure, within the next 30 days. unless for some reason he didn't want it to happen that soon. But I think that, the seminal event was getting these first cases on file. And, because these law firms that are listed on the proposed engagement agreement, their focus is on representing school districts. They're not representing people who have been injured by being addicted to vaping. There are lawsuits around the country where people have sued class actions on behalf of an adult or a minor who's been injured by vaping. But this isn't going to be a class action, and everything that Dr. Harwood said, as you might have expected, I think was spot on and accurate, so he's given you a good overview. Yes?
So all this is gonna cost us is about 20 hours of work, and if we're the first case being tried, what about all the experts that are gonna have to be called and paid for and everything?
Well,
So the agreement that was in the resolution that was in there, talks about that all of the experts are paid for upfront by the law firms, but then that comes out of the, any settlement if there is one. If there is no settlement, if there's no monetary award, then we won't pay for any of that, even if we were the bellwether case. If we're the bellwether case, we'll have a lot more time than 20 hours involved. If they try to designate us as a bellwether case, we could decide, oh, I think we're done, if we don't want to put that much time into it.
in other words, Bill, in the agreement, as you said, there is no upfront, in the middle, or at the end of the case, cost to the district in terms of you guys pay for the experts or someone else. That's part of the agreement, and there's no exceptions to that. That's the agreement.
By the
And,
time it gets to the floor, I'll probably be dead, so.
well, I don't know. I hope not.
Me
But-
too,
But, you know, while it's possible, Bill, that this case could go on for a long time, it's also possible that, for instance, with the opioid litigation file, people go, well, that could go on for a lifetime if not two. Well, you know, there's been an awful lot of, discussions about tentative settlements that have come up. That doesn't mean that will happen here. It just means, it just kind of depends on how this is sorted out.
John's got one.
Yeah, I just had a question about, going after Juul, what about the other companies that supply vaping e-cigs and things like that? Would they be impacted by this in any way, or is it?
You know, I'm sure that they would be, if you're doing some of the same things that Juul did to try to target young people, you would have to be, awfully uncaring and unbusinesslike to not pay attention to that. It's just like if you saw some school district getting in trouble for something and you knew about it, then you'd examine your own policies and say, wait a second, I didn't realize you could get in trouble for that, let's take a look at what we're doing. And so I feel quite sure that it likely would have an impact. It should have.
so maybe more lawsuits.
Well, it could, there could be some, in the meantime, there could be some states that I think, put a moratorium on vaping sales, some have banned, flavored vaping, it seems like every day, I don't know if this is literally true, but almost every day in the last month, there's been another story about somebody dying or some state banning this, and I brought with me the current, Kansas Association of School Boards, book that you probably saw on the front cover is on the dangers of vaping, and by all accounts, it's reached an epidemic. That's not just me, that's what I read in the paper and I read, in the journals that are published by school districts and school boards. Yes?
Do you know if, because Michigan was the first state to ban the flavored Juuls? Or ban the sale of them. And so they gave the retailers, I think, 2 weeks to, why wouldn't all the states, you know, if we really feel it's an epidemic? I mean,
You know, because the legislature has that power, that's a good question. I do know that one of the Olathe school board members, I think within the last year or so, contacted the Attorney General in Kansas to try to get some action and did not get anywhere. And I think that was an important factor for her to say, I've tried other options, and I think this is the right thing to do. That was her decision, of course. That is not the policy.
So I don't want my comments to come off in any way, shape, or form to be construed that I'm not supportive of this, because I do see it as an epidemic. It scares me to death for my own 3 kids, which so far have assured me that they're not facing the peer pressure yet, but I know that day is coming. That being said, I'm also, I think, the only licensed attorney that's on the Board of Education, so I've also seen the dark side to litigation and the such. And one of the things that concerns me a bit is if this is something that school districts have not done in modern history, we'll use that way to describe it, the concern would be, and Ken, I'm going to kind of bring you into this for a second, is if we did receive a financial settlement, what is your, one, where would we put it? Does it go into our general fund? There's no precedent on how you would receive funds from that type of situation, is there? So, yeah. So, and so the only thing I'm concerned about, and I'm just gonna make sure we're all thinking about this, is, you know, the state legislature is always looking at ways to cut school funding. I mean, we know that it's a target of how can we not spend as much money at a state level on our public education system. And should lawsuits such as this become successful, funds start flowing in, it would possibly be a target for the legislature to say, well, gosh, now we don't have to, you know, DeSoto got $2 million from Jewel, we can cut back $2 million from state funding to them. And then the problem becomes if the settlement funds dry up, say a lot of times these things, from my experience with the cigarette settlement that states did, 20 years ago to such, it's tied to the sales of the cigarette. So as sales decline, the settlement proceeds decline, which obviously you want the sale of Juul to decline, that would be the goal. But again, my concern would be, what if our funding was pegged to the settlement, and as it went down, the legislature didn't ramp back up the funding to the schools? And so I'm not saying that's a reason not to do this, it's just something we should be mindful of, because I'd hate to see our students get negatively impacted by a legislature that says, hey, you got money from a settlement, particularly because this is something that pretty much has never been done before. So it's just a thought that scares me a bit.
Could we position the suit in a manner that specifically requests, if any financial settlement is reached, that the monies are geared towards cessation and emotional, I don't know what that might be, but.
I mean, I love where you're thinking, kind of embargo the funds away from our general fund so that they're used for prevention and cessation and mitigation of what's going on. I don't know, Ken and.
So Ken, could this type of revenue be put into gifts and grants?
I don't think so, Frank. It's not really gifted to you or granted to you. It's legally awarded to you.
Yeah.
It may be possible it could go to capital outlay. I don't know.
I know that, I don't know, I haven't seen the paperwork on this, but I do know that Mr. Allison, when he had his news conference, said the board was committed to use any recovery towards helping address the vaping addiction issue. That's where it was gonna go. It's not going anyplace else. It's not going to remodel a classroom. It's not going to be to buy. It's going to be focused on that because that's the mission. And the mission being protecting the health and safety of your students. And if you get a recovery, I think that's what Mr. Allison said in his news conference. That's where the money is gonna go, and I'm sure that's what the board believes and will stand by. It's a good question, but I just wanted to share that with you.
I think you're not even gonna go out and completely separate fund. Think back a few years, we had the Johnson County sales tax. Remember when we had that, school got some of that? That was put in a complete separate fund and designated for specific use, which was technology or special ed. In this case, it went to a special fund and be designated for use of prevention and treatment separate. So that's another possibility.
So I guess I would just end with, is there a rush for us to make this decision this evening? What if we tabled it for 30 days and gave Ken some time to work with KASB to just understand what the thinking is?
So there is not a rush. So we brought it up as an action item because of the conversation it was getting through the county. So it's on as an action item so the board can take action if you want to. You can do nothing. You can say, so you really have to table it, you just wouldn't take action. Even if the motion failed, so somebody moved and it failed, it could still come back up again if the board wants it to. So, yeah, it's not a hurry. I think, this will probably be going on for a while. So, yeah, it was just.
We could also, we could move forward this evening, again, with the understanding that if we found down the road that information was starting to percolate, that this could negatively impact the district, we can always drop out of the.
So the other part of this could be is that the resolution is to authorize me to sign the documents required. I could wait to sign any documents required until I knew where we could put the money and it wouldn't impact the general fund. Because actually that's a really good question. I think we have plenty of time to get it figured out, and you're right. We could at some point, if it says, no, this is where it's gonna go, we say, okay, we don't want that. There would probably be several options with the board being able to designate where the dollars went. But the other thing I was gonna say before I forget real quick, so to answer Bill's question real quick, KASB is actually doing some things for trying to influence the legislature to take action against vaping. At their convention, they'll be talking about looking in favor of tobacco 21 statewide. So they're looking at some legislative things that need to be done. They don't represent any district as a plaintiff. And what ours is for advice and for looking at policy, but they wouldn't represent a district in this case unless you just pay them. I guess I don't know if they could do that.
It would be good if they did something to the state
Yeah.
themselves and all that.
Yeah, and so that's on their legislative agenda for consideration.
Okay, and I don't really have any questions for you, I'm just gonna make a statement. I guess my thing is that I initially, even when I read this, I didn't think about any dollars coming in, because to me, this is us taking a stand. And as a parent of a high schooler that have seen it day in and day out, if this makes a stand for this company to actually realize, and I don't have any personal experience with this, but when I have talked to the administration, specifically at Mill Valley, about all of these individuals that I'm seeing with my eyes as I'm walking on the property. And initially I was like, why aren't we doing something? And I found out the time and the energy and everything else going on, I was blown away. And I know that smoking cigarettes were big in my high school. And I thought it was crazy. And I cannot believe the number of our high school students that can turn around and have one right there. They're not expensive. They're easily accessed. And so here's the thing, I don't care about money. Fine, we get money, we do whatever. To me, this is taking a stand of just showing that we know that this is a problem, this is an epidemic, we have to do something, we need to at least put our name out there, in my opinion, to say, yes, we agree, this is becoming a problem and it's affecting our kids. If you talk with parents that their kids they can't even get them away from them. They take one and the next day they find another one. I mean, I have a friend that she's like, I don't even know what else to do. They're trying everything. To me, this is just taking a stand to a company that is targeting our kids and saying, this is a problem. So to me, money, fine, let's worry about that whenever who knows when that's gonna be, like Bill said. I have no idea. But my point is, this is just taking a stand right now. There is no dollars coming out of our thing. We know that we have our fabulous staff that is going to use manpower. I get it. I totally understand that. But I think that they're just as committed to our kids as I feel like this 20 to 60 hours to make a stand and say, this is what we as USD232 represents.
Yeah, I agree, Angela. I think it's, the drawback seems really minimal, and the impact is potentially huge for us. And there might be some manpower time. It's nothing compared to what we're already spending, attempting, without much success, to try to mitigate this to some extent. And I think, we are just one of hundreds of school districts, hopefully, this month, talking about this as others are putting their names out there, and hopefully, many more will jump on board, and we will be a small seed in this huge wave moving forward and making a stand, taking a stand against this epidemic. If it were opioids, we would absolutely be jumping on board too, I think.
And again, I know people, I've kept up with the Lake Fest. I see their Facebook posts and all the people saying, why are they doing this, blah, 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 blah. I get it, okay? And you're gonna argue anything, and we could argue, we could pick whatever we wanna do. But I still think that as this is increasing, and was it Blue Springs about a year and a half ago when I came to Frank and I said, I think it's Blue Springs, said that, they were taking it really serious, and they were harsh on their punishment, right off the bat, harsh. But I thought, our kids have got to be in school. So sure, we can get them out of school. We can say you have an out-of-school suspension, but guess what? They've got to be there to learn. That's why they're here. So we've got to do everything we can to keep them in school without these distractions. And that's really why I think I'm just so passionate about that. This is a little bit, again, I understand alcohol, we got issues with alcohol. I've heard all the arguments, I understand. But if this is a little thing that we can do without, like you said, without having to put out up front, taxpayer dollars, that's because that's what you're gonna hear about. That's what all Lake is all upset people is, we're not. It's these individuals right now that are probably sitting right here on the side of the room that is gonna be doing it all. And they do it for our kids.
Well, and I think the bottom line is that our students are the victims in this epidemic, and we have a unique opportunity to jump on this bandwagon and really make an impact and a statement, like you said, Angela. We're punishing the victims right now, and we're trying to attack it from that angle, and that has not worked.
We need to take steps at the school to stop this.
I think we are.
This lawsuit's fine, but we need to educate the children. Will the drug dogs pick this up? What can we do to stop this? We need to figure out a way to educate the children how much harm this is doing, plus educate the parents and how much harm it's doing.
So, to my knowledge, drug dogs won't detect it. So one of the things we are doing right now is that DHS is actually developing a Canvas course so that when a student gets suspended for vaping, that typically the suspension is 3 days. If they complete the course in the first 2 days, they get to come back on the third day trying to do some of this education. We've done parent education last year. We're planning to do another one on vaping and also on drugs this year. So there is education going on in the classroom about it. One of the big issues with vaping versus tobacco is that if you have a cigarette, and you can't just put that in your pocket because it's on fire. With vaping, yeah, you can. There's actually, this is not Juul that I know of, but there is a company that's developed one that actually is inside of a hoodie, so that you're using the string as as how you vape. And so we are doing a lot of things. We can do more. Those are going to cost money, which if we're involved in this, could get abated in the future. We're going to do it either way. We're also going to look at ways we can help students that are dealing with addiction, trying to work with Johnson County and all the other places. Again, those will be taking resources that if we join in and this is successful, may at some point be abated.
And no, what I was just gonna add, because I even talked to the middle school, because that's when I kind of first started hearing it, right? Is when my daughter was in 7th grade several years ago. But I mean, I have a child that won't even go to the bathroom at the high school because it's going on so much. And she's afraid that when they walk in, that, you know, because you see it just really quickly and it goes away, but she will not go to the bathroom there because she's afraid that if the staff member walks in and she's in there, right? I mean, so that's what I'm saying. And so, and she's told me about times that they're doing it in the classroom, the teacher turns her back and they've used their hoodies to blow it in. I mean, it's just, yes, it's going on, and it's sad. And I feel bad for our teachers that are having to deal with this constantly in our administration. Okay, so I move, because I'm just very passionate about this, to adopt a resolution authorizing pursuit of litigation against the manufacturers, distributors, and retailers of Juul e-cigarettes and vaping devices.
Second.
All groups, second.
All in favor? All right. Yes, we have a couple more presentations coming our way, so let's take a quick 5 minute bio break, come back at 7:16.
Oh, actually, okay, well, I don't know if this idea was, but thank you.
Bye. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Okay. We are moving on to the bond issue and summer projects update with Steve and Brandon. And I call the meeting back to order.
Good evening. Tonight, as promised last time, if you remember, we said we'd have an update for the Phase 1 bond projects, and part of my portion here would be the structures that are going up on the campus of Mill Valley, and I'll just start by saying, if you haven't driven by there recently, and I know you probably have, it's looking fabulous. It's happening. Hey, Bill says you won't miss it. He wanted to know how high we were going. I can tell you that the concrete wall there for the fly wall of the theater is 49 feet high. Actually, an inch or two above 49 feet. And there's a reason. Once you get to 50 feet, it requires all kinds of additional things which cost money. So we stayed under the 50 feet. You can see the list of projects. Now my portion has to do with the brick and mortar, and my colleague Brandon here, of course, his deals with more of the tech. There you see they're getting ready for the last lift. Like I said, the top of those forms are 49 feet. That is the fly wall of the theater. In our discussion when we were designing, during the designing process, I don't remember where the latest theater was. Maybe Frank remembers. And they did it out of traditional block and steel beams, block and steel. And with all the things you have on a fly wall in a theater, all kinds of vibrations taking place. So the base of that wall, I was telling somebody earlier, is 22 inches thick, that concrete wall, and at the very top, it's about a foot thick. So that's a lot of concrete.
Will that become the new storm shelter?
Actually, no, but that discussion came up. It would need to be capped and all. We are under new building codes now, and I'm shifting gears here a little bit on you, but we are in the final stages of design for the CTE Early Childhood Center. They're on the campus in Mill Creek, and by code, it must have a storm shelter. So, no, to answer your question, it is not. That's what these pictures are. You can see the guys as you're going by. Sometimes they're hanging up there. It's like they're doing a rock climbing wall, but I don't know that they're having as much fun as when you see the kids climb a rock wall. There you see a guy hanging on. They've had to, they can only work up there when winds are laid down a little bit. When the winds kick up, they they're not allowed to get up there. The masons are fine. Our mason for this project is Bone Masonry, and I think they're doing a fabulous job. You can see pictures there of the block, and if you've been by recently, you've noticed that the brick veneer is already going up, and it's going up quickly. There's a view of the competition gym. You can see they've kind of knocked all what they call goobers off of the wall. They cleaned it up, and then they put the air barrier on it, and you can see through the windows there the steel that's been set. Here's a picture of it before the steel was set. That's inside where the gymnasium floor is going to be. They have now poured that. It's slightly more than 22,000 square feet. They did it in, they were going to try to do it in 2 pours. I think they had to do it in 3. And there's a level, one of the things we had a lot of discussion on, we have a special testing company who not only tests the mortar for the blocks that go up, but also they do brakes for the concrete on the theater wall and so on and so forth. Well, another thing that they do is they measure flatness, because it's extremely important to have a floor. I think it's it can't vary 1/8 of an inch over 10 feet. And so it's a major undertaking for those guys to get it as flat as they get it in that big area. It's mind-boggling to me. Another picture of the steel over the gymnasium. There you can see they've started to pour. You can see the concrete. They're finishing there. I don't know how many concrete trucks, but it was a steady diet of concrete trucks. We've tried to do the best job we can to limit the disruption to the traffic flow, because as you know, traffic over there can be very hairy. And he's finishing. Yeah, Mr. Fletcher said that if he was a concrete finisher, he would not be the guy on his hands and knees with the trowel. He'd be sitting on the machine, the float, so the big float machine. South Fieldhouse is now coming out, and really these pictures are a week or so ago, and they have, it's coming up even faster. That's the restroom concession area. There's a nice shot from what looks to be off of a rooftop. So our original estimate was 23.7. The project came in at 23.6 is what the actual bids, including the soft cost, came in. To date, we have spent just over $6 million. I'm happy to say right now, standing in front of you, that we are on budget and on time currently. And I hate expressing that overtly, but that's where we're at right now, and it's looking good. We shouldn't have an issue getting it dried in before the cold weather starts. That's always a goal. Any questions about those projects on the campus of Mill Valley?
We want to put speakers in the teacher's outdoor theater.
I don't believe so, Bill. The question was, are we putting speakers in where? In the parking lot.
We could drive in the field.
I got you. Some of us are not old enough, I guess, to remember driving theaters. I didn't say me, I was referring to Brandon.
Moving on.
Other projects that were bond projects, we are halfway through our playground. If you have not been to, let's see, we have brand new playgrounds. We have 5 of them, because Clear Creek has 2, Starside has 2, and there's one at Mize. Kids at this one, here's a picture of the one at Mize. It's easy to tell that one because they went all out on the color. Let's get a picture of that. Is that what we refer to as a teeter-totter. It's actually an orb rocker. That is a very popular piece of equipment that has had some issues. It's a brand new piece of equipment, but Burke, the manufacturer, has it. They have it figured out, and we're going to have them all fixed up and running again in no time. I want to get a picture of, there's the Gaga ball pit. If you've never played in the Gaga ball pit, you're missing out. They love it. That's the version of a merry-go-round. You can see the difference in the cutout of the turf where the lady is standing there. That is a high-traffic turf, and we put that in all the areas where we believe a wear would take place quicker. I'm going to go back. The structure behind, in the background there, is 15 feet high, and literally, yes, thank you. Literally, I was a little, I wouldn't say nervous, or I was just concerned that are we going to have like injuries? And I mean, it's very soft to fall, but 15 feet is still 15 feet. And there are days that I've shown up at these elementaries here in the recent past. There may be 25 to 30 kids at one time on this one structure. They absolutely love it. So it's been a hit. You know, and part of the kids, principal at Clear Creek had 5th graders, and so I asked her that she had 5th graders help do a presentation, and I got to see all the presentations when we were doing the design, and they had some wild ideas. Well, a lot of their ideas ended up being implemented, and so I asked her, I said, have any of the 5th graders who helped design these been by to check it out? And she says, oh yeah, probably on a daily basis they come tooling through. So like I said, it's been a hit. You notice the curb, we have the curbing that goes around the perimeter of all of them, and they all have the 0 entry. So one of our goals was to make sure this could be accessed by all, and we had teachers in tears the very first day when they got to go out and they got to take their students on it. So that should make you feel good. To date, our original budget for the 9 playgrounds, we have 4 more to do this next summer, was just under $3.2 million. You can see what we've spent to date, which is slightly more than the actual bid amount, because all 3 playgrounds had some drainage mitigation that had to take place, which you really you don't know until you dig into it. So, questions about the playgrounds? The other thing that's, I didn't take a picture of it. I said, Frank, you want me to take a picture of the floors? And it really would have been very exciting to look at, oh, here's a floor. But literally, if you go to LTMS, MTMS,
is amazing.
or DeSoto High School, and the one they all look fabulous, but for whatever reason, the one at Monticello Trails really pops to me, and it just looks great. It's all the epoxy resin floors. We made the custodians extremely happy because there's no more stripping and waxing. So anyway, that project has gone well, and we did our final walkthrough the other day, and there's a few areas where they have to fix, but we're very pleased with the job that was
I
done.
think it's amazing even the appearance in the hallways look totally different. It's like, gosh, what was done here? And you realize it's a floor, but it makes huge. Just the appeal.
Very clean, very clean. Any other questions before I turn it over to Mr. Riffle? Do you know how to work this?
Thanks, Steve. If epoxy floors aren't fun to look at, maybe projectors are. We've completed install on over 500 classroom spaces as part of the audiovisual upgrade. There were 475 in the original standard classroom bid, which included basically any room that seated 30 students, had a suspended ceiling, and no special structural considerations. So we have some buildings like Mill Creek Middle School that had skylights in the center of the room, which posed a problem with getting the new projector, 12 to 16 feet from the wall. So some of those rooms became special classrooms, which we are tackling basically a building at a time and going through with AV vendors and doing the rest of those rooms. Electrical work was done in a considerable number of the rooms because there wasn't appropriate electricity, some of it wasn't up to code. And so we've rectified a lot of that stuff. Here you'll see how clean the install is on the back of the projector. There's not a pile of additional cables the way we had in the past. We had connectors for systems that haven't existed in decades, that weren't even used anymore. You'll see the projection screens are massive. Teachers are given the option if they still want to project directly onto their whiteboard. We can easily scale just a slider on the projector, aim it down a little bit, and have it fit the whiteboard. Some like to mark up on the whiteboard directly, and they can make that change. But every classroom is the same. So as a teacher moves room to room, year to year, or new staff come and go, everybody has the same thing, and not one classroom has.
Just to highlight the Apple TV, they're also put in there, so.
Apple TV. There's some confusion about what an Apple TV is. It's not an actual TV. It's a device that you hook up to your TV or any other. It allows you can install apps on it as well, but the teachers use it for wirelessly projecting from their MacBooks. They can be anywhere in the classroom and get their content up on the projector without being cabled in, or their iPads or their personal iOS devices.
Brandon, are these replacing the smart boards, or have they replaced smart boards? Where smart boards existed?
Some, yes. Some of the buildings still retain some of their smart boards if they were compatible with the Mac OS. Our curriculum instruction department has been working to educate the teachers on how to use their iPads and various apps to basically do the same things they're doing with smart boards, so we don't need to necessarily buy them anymore. The nice thing about using the iPad is you have that smartboard interactivity anywhere in the classroom and not asking people to walk up to the front where maybe they don't feel comfortable being in front of the class. There are still a lot of places that are using interactive whiteboards and smartboards, but we feel like this is a more modern take on that interactivity in the classroom. The original estimate was 2.1. The bid that came in was 911,000. As you'll see, we've gone a little bit over that, but it wasn't on the bid. Those were the additional classrooms that we did. So the phase one was the 475 standard classrooms, and we knew that there was going to be additional expenses. We just didn't know how much because we need to go now room by room, situation by situation, and getting those quotes individually, which is going to be a time-consuming project. But we have until next May or August, I think, to finish that phase of the project. We're actually through with, I think, 3 buildings so far, and then we just started that mid-summer. So we hope to be done with most of these probably by December or January with most of the custom work. Are there any questions about audiovisual upgrades? IP clocks, we are still talking about the IP clocks. We have over 600 IP clock devices on the network currently. There are a handful in some buildings that were having either mechanical or cabling issues. Out of 600, even a handful is a very small percentage, but we're going to get those completed as quickly as we can. We've got cabling contractors and K-12 technicians and the manufacturer all working, and then we will incorporate with facilities a little bit to help maintain some of them going forward. Once they're all installed and we have them working for bells and PA emergency notifications, ADA compliance on the actual notifications where we don't have that now, then we can start working on some of the expanded capabilities of, push a button to tell the entire building you're in lockdown, push a button to describe there's a weather issue. Those sort of things will be kind of implemented as we go forward once the bells and PA is working. Security alert. 1.1 was the original estimate. The bid amount was 762, and we paid 674. There will be a little bit more as we've identified some places that weren't on the original, but it's 1 or 2 clocks per building, and some of the smaller classrooms, the reading aids, math aids, ELL aids have some very small rooms, and we're still trying to determine is just notification to the phone appropriate? Do they need some sort of a larger visual notification system? But we're gonna work those. Right now, the phones that we have on every desk can do all of the same sort of alerting that the clocks can. We can scroll text, we can play tones. Excuse me. What we don't have is a flashing light that we get somebody's attention, but, so there will be a little bit more expense, but I don't anticipate a whole lot on that project. Questions? Security camera replacement. 623 Axis cameras were purchased. We've actually not installed all of them because we have identified, the installers when they were going through, identified places where it seemed like there was overlap and we didn't want to have unnecessary cameras installed, so we put some in our warehouse on a shelf. And now going back and working with building administrators, they found locations where they wanted extra visibility, allowed us to go back and fill in some of those gaps or provide some additional coverage. Bathrooms, hotspots in the cafeteria where they want better coverage of the naughty kids in table 3.
That's outside the bathroom.
No, not inside the bathroom. That wasn't on the record anyway. Specifically, 5th grade bathroom entrances evidently at elementary schools are issues, so they want to know who went in and out, but not what they did while they were in there. That came out wrong for sure. Okay. You'll see here, this is, it's actually one network connection to one camera that has 4 lenses. And that camera can give us, if it was on the end of a pole, a 360-degree view. We use them for a 270-degree view. And you'll see here are the 270 cameras at Clear Creek. You can see all the way around the building with 4 cameras. We actually have a pretty decent shot of both playgrounds from here, but most elementary schools are asking for additional shots of their playgrounds, specifically the ones with the upgraded turf, because now they're so popular. Everybody goes there. A lot more foot traffic. They would like to get a little better coverage, but the views are amazing. And on any one of these, if you double click it, it comes up in full HD, and it's beautiful. Right now, we paid out $491,000. We were quite a bit under budget on this one because we got really great pricing on the cameras and really great pricing on the installation. As I said, we will probably have a little bit more as they identify some additional cameras that we need, but this gives us a little bit of room on this. If there are additional, security concerns, we came in so far under budget, we might be able to address some of those in the future in this project. Any questions on security cameras? Perfect. Mr. King.
So we're happy to say that we now have a 2-way radio system that all 12 schools, and including our facilities department and this office, we can communicate across the district. What you're looking at is a picture of one of the repeaters. This is located at Mill Valley High School. This is an example of the 2 types of radios that were purchased. So what we have is the LED display radio. Those are typically given to administrators and our school resource officers, and then school staff will have the standard unit. And schools we've been slow and methodical because there's been a lot of programming that goes into these units. I've learned a lot about digital mobile radio. But we have schools, Mill Valley High School's been using their radios for several weeks now, and we're bringing other schools online already, and so we're excited about that capability. But in the event of a situation where that we need to communicate and we can't do it by phone or mobile phone, we have this capability to do that, and we've been testing them off and on for several weeks, and it's been interesting to learn about repeaters. So this is again a picture of the repeater. We have 7. Strategically located, and they all work together over the air as well as on our computer network to make sure that we have coverage. So Riverview, Belmont, Mill Valley, Mize, Horizon, Mill Creek, and DeSoto High School provides our 2-way radio system. I've also learned that University of Kansas Hospital is using digital mobile radio as well as some other large organizations. So this is a cost-effective way to have a 2-way radio system. And we are still moving forward, and we will make sure that our schools have access to the radios they need. So we want to thank you to the Board of Education for helping us do this.
Like the radio tower graphic.
Yes, thank you very much, yes. So the original estimate, and when we started this, the estimates from 2 years ago, we estimated 145,000, and the actual bid came at 145,385. You see paid to date, but we actually realized that for our custodians and for our facility staff, we needed protective cases for the radios, and so we did that separately. So that's what we've been paid today. So because they have more apt to drop or whatever, just given the nature of the job. The other thing we're going to talk about is door access system. As you remember, about a year ago this month is when we had I call them the door stations installed with the audio video buzzers. And the image in the middle there is an example. This is at Starside Elementary. When someone walks up, we have a recording of that and we communicate. So that project, actually today we paid $20,058, and you see the original estimate was $244. There's an asterisk there because one, we were able to upgrade our software. We thought we were going to have to purchase all new software to drive that, and so we were able to update it, and so that saved us. But also wanted you to know that this is going to be tied in to our front office doors and security upgrade. One of the things we're already starting to work on now is the next phase, if you will, is once we get the security cameras fully online, as well as the IP clocks, the functionality that we need, we're going to start tying those systems in together with our fire alarm system, our fire doors, I should say. We've talked to you a little bit about adding panic buttons to the front office, some additional locking mechanisms in the front office to create additional barriers. So we'll be coming to you here in the near future for another expenditure related to the security front office upgrade. So I just wanted you to know that's where that's going.
Any additional questions?
Is there such a thing as like a smoke detector that is like super sensitive that would pick up baby?
So we are actually going to be installing a test unit specifically designed to detect vapor. So it's not a smoke detector, it'd be a vapor detector. I'm not sure what the name of it is, but so we're going to see if that works. Yeah. But and it's mobile, so I mean it can be installed and moved. But we just need to find out if that works.
Thanks, Bobby. Okay, we're gonna move into.
Can I say something really fast? It's more just IT for Brandon. The help desk as a parent, I've used it a couple times. They have been fabulous, even when it's just like I should have been able to figure it out on my own type thing. So I just want to say that they don't make you feel dumb when you call, so they're very helpful. So I greatly appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move on to the enrollment reports that Frank will share with us.
All right, we'll go ahead and jump right in. So you don't have to read the one that's on the screen because I knew you wanted a piece of paper with it. But just a little bit to, as a reminder, this is based on the September 20th official count. And that's what we do all of our enrollment reports off of one day because these numbers are already wrong because we've had students move in and move out. And so you just have to pick one day. This is the date the state uses. Subject to changes with continued review. Even as I was putting this together, you find some anomalies some places. And so one of the first ones we found was an 11th grader at Monticello Trails. And so you got to go back through and get their grade recoded, and so we may still find some of those, so little numbers could change here and there. And then the audited numbers will not be available until spring, so the state audits all of our numbers. Typically when we're doing this part of it, if we're unsure, we include them in the count because it has to do with funding, and then the auditor may take them out. For example, to be counted, you have to be enrolled on September 20th, and you have to attend in the next 10 days. So there could be a student who was enrolled on September 20th, but moved and didn't come back, and then they'll be taken back out. So the other thing that could happen is, and I'll talk a little bit more about some other specific areas where it can change. So kind of going through each section, early childhood, those evaluations continue throughout the year. So there are some of the students that are currently included that are in evaluation. And so if they don't actually qualify, then they would be taken back out, but then there would be more students that would come in. So those numbers fluctuate quite a bit. One thing I'll point out is that there, of the 193 students that it looks like there are at Belmont, 135 actually attend classes there. The other 58 come by appointment. So they come in mostly for speech language, but don't attend classes. And then the Early Childhood Center that will have 8 classrooms. And so the 7 classrooms, there's 6 at Belmont and the 1 at Starside will, those 7 plus an additional 8 will be used there. And then parents as teachers, which is currently housed at Lexington Trails, will also move into that building we talked about last month. Questions about early childhood? All right, elementary. So the total elementary enrollment decreased by 3 students. We actually expected a larger decrease because the 5th grade class is our second largest grade. So you have a very large 5th grade class moving out. But this year's kindergarten class was 46 bigger than last year's kindergarten class. So you'll notice in there that for several years, kindergarten has always been our smallest grade, and then we grow throughout usually we grow quite a bit between kindergarten and 8th grade. But this time we actually had quite a few more kindergartners. So, and although we've heard about concerns with enrollment at Clear Creek, all schools are within their in their functional capacity. Clear Creek grew by 12 students this year. Riverview grew by 22, but that means that other ones decreased, and all had to do with where kindergartners showed up. You'll notice that Clear Creek has the largest of the kindergarten classes. That's something we will continue to keep an eye on. The question that comes up is that 3 years ago with the change in the horizon boundary, I went back and looked at the projections that I made at that time, and there are actually fewer students at Clear Creek and Prairie Ridge than was projected, but more of them are at Clear Creek than we thought, and fewer of them are at Prairie Ridge. So one of the things that we'll do is after this, after all of our numbers are complete, and that, by the way, is on Friday or Thursday, when this has to be submitted, we have all of the students geocoded, so we can go back through and look at neighborhood by neighborhood what the changes were, and that will give us a better idea of anything we may need to do with looking at the future. Okay. Oh, and then the other issue that we'll need to look at is Mize had a particularly large increase in special education. We have 2 center-based programs at Mize right now. So one of the things that we will probably need to talk about is whether both of those center-based programs can remain at Mize, or if one of them should move to another location. We've moved center-based programs around. Personally, the way I try to approach that is not to move a program so that an individual student doesn't move more than once. And actually, that's one of those programs only has 1 student left as 5th graders move, so I'll look at that.
What are the percentages again? That's percentages of the total amount?
So 13.5% of the students at Mize are special education, yes, and not gifted. Yes. Yeah. Any other questions about elementary? Okay, middle school increased by 48 students, which was what we expected because we had the large 5th grade class that became 6th grade. We have 29 new voluntary transfers were approved for LTMS this year, and 26 of them were 6th grade students. So if you look at Lexington Trails 6th grade has 126 students. That is about the perfect number for a 5-person team. Because if you have 25 students in a class, that's 125 is, if you can get middle schoolers to show up 125 students at a time. Now, so if you have 2 sections, it is 250. So you kind of look at what that's done to some of the other ones, like Mill Creek 7th grade is a small group. Lexington Trails is a large group. So as we talked about last year, one of the things we will have to continue to do is monitor the Lexington Trails enrollment on the voluntary transfer approvals to not get Lexington Trails too large and make some of the other ones too small. And one of the reasons for that is that if you get to, at some point, this will happen in the future as the growth continues, Lexington Trails will need to have more than 5 people on a team. Like it's possible, and I think it's really tricky because right now the teachers teach social studies, science, math, English language arts and pathways. When you put a 6th person on the team, then it gets really messy. That will happen at some point. What my suggestion was last year is that we limit that while we're taking voluntary transfers. So we'll continue to look at that. One of the things we did this year was when we put out the voluntary transfer information, said you may not be approved based on enrollment. So we'll continue to do that. Any questions about middle schools? All right, high schools. We saw a slight decrease in the number of high school students. It was 15 students smaller. That's because the last year's graduating class of seniors was larger than the 8th grade class last year. 8th grade, actually, so this year's 9th graders are among our smaller classes. However, it wasn't consistent. So Mill Valley decreased by 57 students. And just so you know, that makes them the smallest 6A school this year. They went to 6A for the first time last year. DHS increased by 42 students, which isn't necessarily unexpected. They're just under 1,000 students now. For voluntary transfers, there were 65 new voluntary transfers were approved for DHS. There are about 200 total, but 65 were new, and 57 of those were 9th graders. So if we would not have the voluntary transfer program, you would have seen Mill Valley stay about the same, and DeSoto would have been about this. I mean, so you could have seen a balance, and you wouldn't have seen that of the 15 smaller, Mill Valley had the most of them. That is just a question that will have to be addressed in the future as we get to, after the Mill Valley projects are done, the capacity of Mill Valley will be over 1,500. As the growth continues, at some point, we probably will be less interested in people transferring. And so not paying for the transportation could be a part of that. So that'll just have to be a conversation in the future. Any other questions about high school?
I have a question just more about transfers. So some of those 200 kids are at DHS but in Mill Valley territory. Let's say they decide the next year that they want to go to Mill Valley. You just say okay, right?
Yeah, so any transfer that we have can always go back to their home school. That is not an approval process. That's actually by our policy, that's the building they should attend. They have to get permission to approve to attend a school that's not in their attendance area. And we do have some students that are transferring from DHS to Mill Valley. That's under a general transfer, and we don't provide transportation.
Sure. Okay.
All right, so district programs, the virtual education program, the 10 students that are in that are only the full-time students. There are also some part-time students that attend brick and mortar schools part of the day. So that's 10. That's a decrease of 1. We aren't looking to increase our virtual education enrollment. To be enrolled in that, you have to be considered at risk for some case. A lot of this would be something with medical issues or some other issues that are there. The bridge increased by 5 students, which doesn't sound a lot, but that's almost 50% larger. We were anticipating this just because of the group of students that was moving on. We provided more space last year at the bridge, and so we'll continue to do that. We have provided more staffing, but hiring paraprofessionals is challenging right now. So we are looking for paraprofessionals there. So we have the staffing allocated for the increase, but there are open positions. And then the 22 students that it says outside of USD232, that falls into 2 categories. We do have some students that we transport to other facilities for their education. That would be some sort of specialized service. And then we also have students that attend either home schools or private schools that we provide special education services to. And that would be the ones that are on an itinerant basis. So their school of record is actually, could be like Sacred Heart would be the most common example. But if they receive special education services, we have staff to go there to provide those.
Do they all go to that school? Are they ever bused into our school?
So it would depend on the service that's being provided. We would try to, I mean, it depends on the number. Like if you're a homeschool student, we also provide special education services if you qualify. Typically, they would come to us. If there are enough students at a particular school, then we may go to them. So when you look at the district overall, we're well within our capacity. Again, we've talked about that there are pockets where we're closer to capacity than other places. Student demographics remain consistent. Overall, we increased by 30 students K-12, which is about 0.4%. So that's not record-breaking growth by any means. When I talk to other people about that, a lot of people are very surprised by that because you look at all of the foundations, all of the building going on. Some of that has to do with the price point of the homes that are being built, especially at the lower grades. So that will depend on things, see how things go from there. We had 59 students total, so some of that, there was an increase in early childhood, which aren't counted in the K-12. The reason I break those out differently is has to do with capacity of the buildings, and so we're looking at that. And then we're at 45.9 funded FTE. And again, funded FTE, the early childhood students are typically counted as 0.5 because they don't attend all day. We also have students that attend part-time for various reasons, so that's why that's in there. Any questions? So once we get the student addresses geocoded, we'll start looking at some different trends, and we'll come back with anything that comes up with that as we move along. Yeah.
So I think we all got an email today from a concerned parent at Clear Creek, and you know, looking at the numbers here, it does feel like, okay, we're pretty close to functional capacity in that building. I wonder, you know, in the 4.5 years I've served on this school board, and then I was on the boundary committee before that, I'm not sure there's a more complicated problem. If you think school funding is complicated, this is what makes it complicated. But you know, it's definitely a bit of an alarm to see that situation there. And I wonder, is there anything we could do at all to alleviate some of the concerns that were voiced in that email, and or can we proactively be aggressive in how we're going to handle this for next year?
So I didn't receive the email. I got forwarded to me. I have not had a chance to read it. So I don't know specifically what things could be addressed. So one of the things, if it's overall numbers, so once we look at where the students are living, we can kind of get a better idea. Is there an obvious boundary change that makes a difference? Boundary changes are never a lot of fun. And they're typically more permanent fixes for what could be a more temporary situation. So that's the other thing we'll be able to spend more time doing. Is this a temporary issue, or is it we see it as more of a permanent issue? Without boundary changes, just changing the number of students, you know, that's actually what we're doing with voluntary transfers to DHS and LT. So we could look at a voluntary transfer situation from Clear Creek to a specified elementary that has fewer students. So Belmont or Horizon. Remember, Horizon, we intentionally lowered the amount because we see the Horizon neighborhood has a lot more potential for growth. But in the meantime, that might be a way to solve a temporary problem. The other thing would be, so then there are other things you can do with staffing that we can look at as well, and we'll look at that as we do that. Yeah. So I have to look at the question.
Yeah.
And if you can, maybe just let us know at the next meeting, just a quick update.
Sure.
I feel for him.
So I will say that the classroom, the class sizes at Clear Creek are not larger than there may be one grade that's higher, but they don't have the largest classes, but there are more bodies. So we've added the staffing, the classroom staffing. We can look at, are there other supports? Okay.
Okay, any patron input, Ms. Wendy? Okay. We have one FYI report on the Special Services Advisory Committee. Please take a look at that. And if there's anything else, we are adjourned. 8 o'clock on the dot.